you work on the hypnotherapy stuff, and that gets a super bad rep from a lot of people. But I think you accept it as more subconscious work as anything else, and people don't realize
They
that.
don't know what it is.
They don't. But maybe like there's actually a very popular example of hypnosis mentioned somewhere. When I read this example a few years ago, I found it so interesting. And when you said you did hypnotherapy, I wanted to bring it up.
Okay.
Do you know Alan Carr?
Who?
Alan Carr.
I've heard of Alan Carr, yes.
Yes, he wrote the book The Easy Way to Quit Smoking,
Yes, okay.
which is it's the most popular book that people purchase when they want to quit and have an extremely high success rate on it.
Okay.
And I was reading it a few years ago, just to kind of see, what does he advise? Because smoking is one of those interesting things. Everyone knows it's pretty bad for you,
Yes.
so they don't stop doing it.
Yes.
He has an interesting quote where he says, "If knowing that smoking killed you was enough to prevent you, you would have never started in the first place."
100%.
And he tells a story where he stopped because he went to go see a hypnotherapist about it. And after one session, he just never smoked again.
Yes.
And he didn't recommend the hypnotherapy way. He didn't dive into it deeper. But what he does in the book is he deglamorizes smoking.
Okay.
So he essentially takes all the things you think you like about it and proves it to you that you don't actually like it and you don't actually need it and there isn't actually a situation for it. So I wonder, is that actually a technique that you guys use, and can you break that down a little bit?
Yes. So, okay. So with smoking, a lot of it, okay. So the way I work is conversational, right? So there's a lot of techniques. I don't follow one technique. So it's a lot of techniques that gets thrown in there and principles being used to break down whatever the person is telling himself about smoking, right? So
Maybe just to stop you, this doesn't only apply to smoking, but any kind of addiction.
any kind of problem, because the problem is a smoking addiction or a drug addiction or depression, it's still a problem, right? So yeah, so I use a lot of techniques gets used and a lot of principles gets used in conversation, whereas a normal classic therapy would be the person will go through a script. So it will start, the trance will start, then they'll work through the process, find out if they need to do a regression maybe, or use something like parts therapy or whatever therapy they want to use in hypnosis. Whereas I do conversational. So I go with what you tell me. So whatever you give me, it's like a tennis match. It's like you give me something, and then I take that, I wrap that up a little bit differently, and I give it back to you, right? So that being said, I use a lot of different techniques. I can't tell you the protocol that's being used at all, because it's all the same thing. It's an unconscious activity that we need to fix and sort out and find out what's the patterns and what's the stories you're telling yourself, because you're believing in some other story and you're telling yourself that story and you get stuck in that loop. And you're telling yourself, I can either look like with smoking, it also depends on the person, because there's a lot of other things involved. Like for instance, I've worked with people that's gone for stop smoking, and then they stop smoking, and then the first drink they have, they smoke again. So it you have to test your model and see, okay, so you're in this state now, in a resourceful state, because that's also another thing. A person smokes, they can't stop, and then they try with effort. Like the average guy is going to try with effort and motivation and positive thinking. They're going to try and sort that out, but that's not how it works, right? These are unconscious activities, and it's behaviors and habits being formed around that. And remember, the reason for the smoking, we don't know what it is at that moment, but the reason for smoking could be, there could be a gain in it, a secondary gain. Like for instance, the person can get a lot of attention because they're smoking and want to stop smoking. They go to their doctor tells them, listen, you need to stop smoking now because this is bad for your health. That's attention, right? So is it because that person was never given that attention as a child at a younger age when they needed those resources? We don't know. So we need to work through those. That's why hypnosis is so powerful, because we can go find where was that seed planted so that you can eat the fruit that you're eating now. So let's plant a new seed so that you can eat better fruit.
It's such an interesting take, and maybe that is a bit to what Alan Carr does, because he goes through every reason that he's found and he breaks it down to
Clever.
why it's actually not giving you the effect you want. So essentially, instead of finding the root, it's addressing all possible roots
Yes.
and going through.
Yes.
The interesting one you said is that attention. A lot of people smoke because it's a social thing. Because there's a corner where you all have to go to and you all have to stand there together and indulge in the fact that you all have the same habit, right? Or same weakness, if you want to call it that.
That's right.
He's got such a comedic way of putting it as well, because the common example, it ties a little bit to your drinking analogy, but he uses after a meal, smokers love to take a pull of a cigarette.
Yes.
And he said a lot of people come up to him and like, oh, but why if I finish a meal and I see my friend pull out a cigarette and I get keen for it?
Yes.
And he says, well, if your friend pulled out a needle and started doing heroin after eating, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm so jealous. You'd be like that. It's sad that he needs that to have a meal.
Yes.
But I think it's interesting on that idea that you're talking about of people try to get through willpower and effort and so on. Are you familiar with Dr. K at all?
No idea.
So Dr. K, he's a psychiatrist in America he was a Harvard steward for a long time, and he was en route to getting tenure at Harvard, which is a huge deal. And he decided to leave that, and now he does consulting, but primarily he streams on YouTube and Twitch mental health advice for people that are chronically online. And his perspective is super unique because he's Indian, and his first generation immigrant, so his parents moved to America when he was a kid. And for 7 years, he decided to be a monk.
Sure.
And then he tells the funniest story where he says he went to the yogi, the highest up yogi, and says he wanted to devote to being a monk. And the yogi told him, to be a monk is to surrender your life, and you don't have a life to surrender right now. Go back, get a degree, and then we can talk about it. And when he went back to go get a degree so that he could surrender it, he met his, at the time, girlfriend, who was like, man, I really want to be married to a doctor. So he's like, screw the monk thing, I'm going to become a doctor. But he's extremely clever, and I love how he incorporates Eastern wisdom into it. And he does a lot of psychotherapy, and he recently spoke with Dr. Andy Huberman about it, where he says so many people try to stop or put in effort towards, for example, stop being a narcissist. Their way to go about it is to not be a narcissist anymore, instead of putting in effort to not be that.
Yes.
And then I also want to talk about that seed being planted, because this is something I wondered after our first conversation.
Sure.
So Daniel Kahneman wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, where he talks about mode 1 and mode 2 thinking. Are you familiar?
No idea.
So mode 1 thinking, he talks about things that are immediate, that you don't think about doing anymore. For example, driving, it's kind of just subconscious. You do it, you don't need to pay attention. Or mode 2 is things you actively have to think about doing, like a Sudoku puzzle or a game of chess or something. He talks about at some point you transition something from mode 2 to mode 1. And you can view that as going from conscious to subconscious.
Yes.
And there's probably that similar idea that you deal with at some point, something that was very conscious became subconscious. And that, what I want to know is there a way to catch yourself before it becomes subconscious? Or are all these things kind of developed in your very developmental years as a child and adolescent, and it's more about just attacking what's already there and not necessarily preventing more things from being added onto it?
So you mentioned it going from conscious to unconscious, right? So a lot of that has got to do with your development years, right? It's normally from before the age of 10, right? And the reason for that is before the age of 10, your resources was your parents or your guardians, right? So whatever happened to you where they were not present or they did not help, you did not have the resources to then deal with whatever that problem is that then happened. Like it could be something small, like a spider ran over your hand, right? And you got a massive fright. You got no idea what the hell happened. You are scared. And since that day, that person's got a phobia for spiders. This is not just an example, right? That now stays unconscious. That stays in the subconscious. Now that person will go through his whole life, and whenever that trigger happens, he sees a little spider or something, he freaks out and he doesn't understand why. It's only because the resources he needed at that age was not there. So now he comes to see a hypnotherapist. We can regress and find out exactly that feeling that you have towards a spider, that's fear or whatever it is. We can regress back on that exact emotion. We can go back through the years, all the way until the prior to 10, right? And then we'll go through that process of what exactly happened. Then to give an example, then you bring the adult in. You bring yourself, that person's adult. You bring that adult in to explain to the child, you were just a kid. I am now an adult. There's no need to be scared of spiders anymore, right? Now, what you mentioned last time, the unconscious is now becoming conscious. You're bringing the unconscious activity to the conscious awareness, and then it dissolves the problem.
I want to ask a little bit on that, most of it being formed before the age of 10.
Sure.
The immediate example that I think to is, say you're a 19-year-old kid, you just got to university, big change of environments now. Now your parents are absolutely removed as a resource, except for possibly financially.
Sure.
Say they go on a date or something and it goes horrible, and the girl says some terrible things to them, and they now develop this mental blocker of, oh, I'm just meant to be alone for the rest of my life.
Yes.
That feels like it's well, it's conscious in the fact that you're actively thinking. At the root of it, subconscious. So is there still cases where subconscious behaviors can have trickled in at later ages, and are those easier to kind of untangle, or do they stay as difficult as the ones in your developmental years?
They stay as difficult till the day you die. That will stay in the unconscious. Remember, the reason for that is the unconscious just wanted to protect you. It wanted to protect you at that stage, at that specific moment, right? So if in your example, the person I spoke to this girl and, it's not going as he wanted, and they get into an argument or whatever, and he feels that he doesn't have a way to deal with this. It's not necessarily to say that it's because of what happened in his development years. It's not to say, right? It's normally big things like, it's like normally phobias and fears and big stuff that normally happens, but it could still be due to that, for sure, 100%. It can still be that, but it's normally in cases like that, it's difficult to say. Here's how I would discern between the two. If it becomes a problem for the person, in other words, if you had a discussion or a fight with your girl and you upset, that's normally supposed to be upset, right? Maybe it's trying to show you something to fix within yourself, right? Or to communicate with your girlfriend. There's no reason to go for therapy for that. But if it becomes a problem in your life where you can't go to work because anybody just says anything skewed to you and you go sit and get depressed for a month and you're not getting back to work, or you can't drive your car because someone just said something silly to you at the filling station, right? That is something completely different, right? But because that's just something small that you need to work on. You're human, you're going through challenges. But it's always the big things. It's the stuff that becomes a problem in your life where you can't function your normal adult life due to that. That's normally regress. Regression is the last resort. Like I don't just use regression. It needs to be a very strong emotion, because otherwise, how's the unconscious going to know? You can't give it, it's not a time traveling box where you can go and listen, take me back to where I was 3 years old in my parents' garage, right? You can't do that. You can only go back on a specific emotion. And obviously, for that emotion to be strong, it had to start at that age, and then throughout your whole life that followed you, right? And now it's a problem because you're feeling this feeling the whole time.
So, would you think it would be fair to say that if we continue this example of someone getting into a bad date and giving up on dating, which is, in some regards, like a life-hindering thing,
Yes.
would it be fair to say that you can actually probably trace back that that's just piling on something that happened earlier?
It could be, but what I would do is I would always just use other techniques first within conversation, the way I do it with conversational hypnotherapy. If I find that is not going to untangle the issue, and the person is not, and we're not getting that unconscious to the conscious awareness, then I regress. But otherwise, I don't. It's not needed.
I want to ask on this because it's something that I've been wondering for a while on the podcast, and I've been asking various people. I noticed there's this very fine line between opposite ends of personalities. So if you take the example of someone that has very negative self-thoughts, self-image, whatever, they think, let's use a basic example, I'm overweight, right? The fine line between the person who goes, oh, I'm overweight, that's going to motivate me to go gym and like exercise and better myself, and the person who says, oh, I'm overweight, I'm going to eat to deal with this problem of being overweight. It's a very fine line. I want to kind of pinpoint, why do people default to one or the other when faced with the same external stimulus or internal stimulus in this case. And I think the conclusion I came to is whatever you developed as a child, that's the thing that's stuck. And I think that speaks a little bit to what you're talking about. So if when you were a kid, exercising made you feel better about your weight problems, and it was the first thing you happened to try, you're going to stick with that. Yes. If the first thing you happened to try was eating to suppress your emotions, get that dopamine spike to kind of remove it, then that would be the thing you stick with.
Yes.
So I came to that conclusion, and I think there's some work by it's Dr. David Spiegel. He's a Stanford University lecturer that he does a lot of research on the clinical applications of hypnotherapy and the effect on the brain and whatnot. And he's literally done fMRI scans to show that hypnosis can actually help downregulate certain active areas of the brain that are triggered during traumatic responses. So when I started reading about this, and it's something that's true, is that the forms in the beginning, you're shit out of luck. You chose the wrong one when you first dealt with the problem. Now, how do you undo that later on in life? How do you go from I'm using food as a coping mechanism to now it's becoming, or I'm using food to deal with my weight problems to now my weight problems becoming the motivation that drives me towards doing something? Yes. Do you think that there is a way to transition like that, or?
Look, it's very client-centered. So it's difficult, or I think it's I don't want to. It's actually dangerous to decide before the time. I think it's better if this person can maybe find another way of getting motivated, because you don't know what the reason is for them not being motivated, right? If I take an example of yourself, you got a day job, you're busy, but you're still doing this, right? There has to be a very good motivator for you to do that. It's not just you don't get up in the morning and make a conscious decision saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to push through. No, there's an emotional drive. Am I right? There's an emotional drive within you that is forcing that. So whenever something comes up, any task or any challenge comes up, you bulldoze through that because there's an emotional drive. If there was no emotional drive, the first hiccup, you're going to say, this is not worth it, screw this, I'm going to just throw it to the side. But because of that emotional drive, but now that goes both ways. Because if that emotional drive is negative, well, what we call negative, that person will block himself to not get what he wants. Because just so I can make this more clear, the unconscious is always there to protect you and safeguard you, right? There's no time involved. There's no past or future. There's just to protect you. The intention is always protection, but the behavior could be anxiety, depression, no motivation. But the intention was always to protect you and safeguard you, right? So in other words, what I get a lot with anxious people when they suffer with anxiety, as soon as they realize the reason for that anxiety is actually unconscious, trying to protect you against something that probably happened in the past, and it doesn't want you to ever go through that ever again. So it says, you know what? You will never experience that again, because that's worse than this little bit of anxiety you're experiencing now. I'll keep you safe, and I'll rather give you bits of anxiety so that you don't have to feel that spider running over your hand again, for instance. Does it make sense?
It does make sense.
So the intention is always good. The unconscious intention it's always good. It's always for protection. It's always for protection, even if it means smoking cigarettes until you die, because the unconscious doesn't know death and life.
It's very interesting, because then you have to kind of look at it through this lens of, I have my conscious, which is good at making long-term decisions. I have my subconscious, which is good at making short-term decisions. How do I train the two to coincide with each other? But interesting that you said the the negative motivation, because I think that's something that a lot of high performers deal with, and something that I deal with, where you almost want your bread buttered both ways. You know, you want to have this extreme drive that pushes you to do things, but you also don't want that the underlying fact is you feel like a failure if you don't. You know, and do you think there is a way of maybe not rewiring the subconscious behavior, or at least toning it down so it doesn't feel as extreme?
So in that case, so what you're telling me is one part of you is motivated and wants to go. Am I right? And then there's another part of you that says, I don't want to be a failure. Okay. So let's examine that quickly. So that part of you that's got the drive, that wants to go and that's motivated. Why is that? What's it doing for you? What's its function?
So using your ideas, you failed at some point, it made you feel horrible. It wants to prevent you from feeling the sense of failure again.
Sure. But if I ask you now, what is that? What's that drive doing for you?
It's helping you succeed.
It's for success. Okay. Now the other part of you says you don't want to fail. Why not? What is that function? If you don't want to fail,
it's because failure feels bad, isn't it?
Yes, but what's the function of it that you don't want to fail? Because you want to
succeed.
Aha. Can you see that they both want the same thing? Does it make sense to you now what I mean with the intention is always the same with the unconscious, but the behaviors could be different. The one could be a motivating part and the one could be a negative part, but they actually want the same thing for you. So in other words, what's happening then is you've got a conflicting parts within you. One part wants to do this, one part wants to do that. So if you had to come and see me, that's exactly what I'll do. I'll mediate between those two parts. It's actually called parts therapy. So I'll mediate between those two parts so that you can see there is no conflict. There was a story I told myself about motivation, and there was a story I told myself about failure. Why can they not coexist at the same time if the intention was exactly the same?
Well, I think people would push back on that and say they like the motivation part because that feels good, but they don't like the failure part.
Sure. But now that you know that that part of you that doesn't want to fail is because it wants to succeed.
Yes, I understand. And, I think that's why I say it's wanting your bread buttered both ways. You want to have the good without the bad.
Yes.
So what you're saying is it's not really possible because they both drive each other.
They both drive the same thing. The intention of the unconscious is exactly the same there. They both want you to succeed. But now that, as soon as the person then realizes that, what am I failing at here? I'm going to fail as much as it's needed for me to succeed. Because behind all that failure, what are you aside from all that failure? What are you beyond that?
What are you beyond all that failure?
If I ask you, aside from that failure, what are you beyond it?
It's not really an easy answer.
Because you've got to go inside to get that answer, right? That's conversational.
Interesting. I wanted to ask, so you obviously speak a lot about using conversational therapy, but the traditional thing that people think of when they think of hypnotherapy is like, oh, okay, 1, 2, 3,
Yes.
go to sleep.
Yes.
And that's called a trance in like the pop culture sense of it.
Yes.
But when we spoke last, you said you enjoy just putting people in a trance in regular conversation. Can you maybe demystify what a trance is and put it maybe into more clinical terms so people aren't as put off by it?
Okay. So with that being said, what you said, the classical, I'm going to put you in a trance, right? It's because of all that information that people are misled, because you're always in a trance. You're in a trance right now. We got a certain context going here. We're in a professional environment. You've got your setup here, and the context is here for business. I'm not gonna now take out my food and start eating my takeaways while we're doing this, right? Because we're in context, right? Does that make sense, right? But you're always in a different state of trance. In other words, if you come to me and you're telling me, let's use the spider again. If we're sitting here and you see a small little spider over there and you freak out, but I don't, why is that? Is it because of the spider or is it because of what's inside of you?
Your context towards the situation feels different.
Okay, so then you're in a trance because you're feeling something I'm not feeling. So you need to be in a different trance to me.
So trance is the contextual setting you put yourself in when you're in situations. Is that?
And you're set within yourself, right? So if you come with a problem, you're in a trance of problems. You're in a state where you believe you got problems. If I then help you as a therapist to get you into a state of solutions, you're in a different trance again, aren't you?
So when you're saying you're putting people into a trance, when you speak to them, you're putting them into a certain frame of reference on how to view
Yes.
things. And I guess in a clinical session, that would be a frame where you're bringing out the thing that's been hidden down beneath.
Yes.
So essentially
Yes.
walking people the path to remembering these things that happen
Yes.
within themselves.
Yes.
Interesting.
So basically, I help to evoke the resources within you due to playing around with the trances. So, okay, you're telling me you've got this problem. If let me give you an example. If you tell me, listen, I've got a problem, and I just ask you, oh, why is it a problem? You'll give me a list of reasons, right? But if I ask you, what is it about that problem that makes you keep on to it? Can you see the difference? You need to go find that answer inside of yourself. So I'm evoking a certain state within you just with that question, right? And that state is where all your resources are at.
Do you think it's necessary to talk therapy through it? Because I can think of certain quotes that when I've heard them, it's evoked a certain emotion in me to be like, oh,
100%.
I'm reflecting that. The one that immediately comes to mind is Chris Williamson says something along the lines of, you wouldn't ruminate if you weren't getting something out of good rumination. And that immediately causes me to go into a state of, okay, what are the possible things that I am getting out of this rumination?
Yes.
And I think one of the interesting perspectives that someone recently gave me on is sometimes you hold on to things, even though it's painful, just because it's lost connection you have to that thing. So, if your dad dies or something, you hold on to the pain of the death because that's the only thing that's left of your father.
Yes. And then when you talk about your father, then what happens? It evokes a certain trance, right? It evokes certain emotions. That emotions, you just went from your normal state that we would call normal to being sad, for instance, right? Or whatever the feeling is. You shifted states by just words. Someone said something or a trigger or anything triggered you. You're now feeling a different state than what you just felt 5 seconds ago.
Is there a default state that you can get to? Because I know in modern psychiatry, I guess I call it, they refer a lot to the default mode network, where this is the thing you default to. Is there a healthy default mode network to reach to, or is it all just contextual to what you're doing?
It's always going to be, you're always going to be, number one, you're always going to be in a state. And number two, you're always going to be in the state you tell yourself. So whatever story you tell yourself, that's the state you're going to be in, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people, the stories they tell themselves, I mean, you got 90,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them is the same thoughts as yesterday, and 90% of them is negative. So most people are always in a negative state of trance. So when they come and see me, I know how to talk to the unconscious so that I can evoke other states. So I can show you, you're stuck in that loop, you're telling yourself this story. Let me just show you something else quickly. And then as soon as the unconscious sees, hold on, this could be seen in a different light. There's change, this is possible, right? Think about it. How many times have you spoken to a friend, you feel sad and you feel down and you talk to a friend and he just says one sentence somewhere and you just go, aha, hold on, I feel a little bit different now. What happened? You went from a certain state that you're telling yourself the whole time, that you are now feeding that seed. You're going to eat those fruits, right? You can't expect to put out bad seeds all the time and eat good fruit.
It's interesting. So your subconscious basically finds a new defense mechanism, but one that serves you better.
One that serves you better. That's the difference.
That's very interesting.
You hit the nail on the head there. To give you an example, think of a time where you felt really good. Can you feel it now?
Yeah.
Okay, how did you do that?
It this game maybe sound a little bit cheesy or corny,
No, not at all.
but when I get a good laugh out of a group, it makes me feel on top of the moon. But to relate back to what you said, it does remind me of a point of my childhood where I had the opposite effect.
Okay.
Where I told a joke and someone got very angry, or the group kind of shunned me for it. So it's almost like it's
Yes.
taking the exact situation, flipping it on its head. And that's probably why it's a powerful invocation of
Yes.
memory.
Yes, but you can feel that, right?
Yeah.
So if I ask you, is it moving now? Can you feel it spread? Can you notice a difference now?
So the thing is, as soon as you made me invoke that positive one, my brain immediately said, "Can we think of a negative example?" And I immediately,
Of course you can.
And I did feel a bit of a shift in, like, your body almost gets a bit colder in a sense, because you're altering, I guess,
Yes.
that lens that you're saying now. Yes.
So are you telling me that with the one sentence I told you, you went through a positive and a negative state?
Yeah.
So how did you do that? You don't even know how you did that, but
Yeah.
you did, right?
I think what's interesting is the fact that my brain tried to immediately contradict a good memory of a bad memory, almost
Yes.
as if my subconscious telling me you can't feel good right now.
Yes.
That's not
So what could be so important that you would override the positive with a negative? I wonder what that means for you. Makes you think.
I think so. The thing is, I'm very self-reflective of these things, so I have a good idea.
You're very aware, yes.
Yeah, and it goes back to a lot of, as you said, in my childhood. I was a very bullied person growing up, and it's funny how your brain latches to solutions that seem so logical at the time, but when you grow up, you realize they're illogical. So I went to 3 different schools throughout my life, and the first one I got bullied, and then I changed schools. Second one I got bullied,
Oh no.
and then I changed schools again. And I remember, as a kid, you don't have perspective of what other people's lives are like.
No.
And I thought everyone just got treated like that. So at my second school, when I talked to people from outside the school and I told them what was happening, they're like, "It's a terrible thing that's happening. You need to get out of that situation."
Yes.
And that's when I swapped schools the third time, and I got bullied again. And then the logical conclusion to me as a kid is like, "Oh, it must be me. I must be the problem."
Okay.
And then it's only once you grow up and you go, no, the reality is most people, well, not most people, but a lot of people get bullied, and it's never the person getting bullied's fault. But that's not how it seems as a kid. But what you see as a kid is, this hurts, and I want to stop it now.
Yes.
And that's probably what's still happening now is I was so used to the bad things happening that I gave myself this idea that must mean that there's something wrong with me.
Yes.
So even when I want to feel good, my subconscious is telling me, but we're bad, we don't get to feel good.
Yes. It's for me, it's interesting that it's more interesting of why you said it than what you said. So why did you feel it's needed for you to mention that when I asked you to feel something good?
I don't know. It felt automatic. It felt very
It
much
felt
one.
automatic,
Yeah.
right? So did you decide for it to feel automatic?
No.
Okay. So I wonder what other things feels automatic in your life right now, where the solution actually just piggybacks on the problem itself.
The solution piggybacks on the problem itself. That's a very interesting one. I think, I spoke about this in my most recent episode, but I audit my life very frequently. So every 3 months or so, I'll write down the things I'm unhappy with.
Yes.
Almost like a businessman going, next quarter, we have to work on these things. And the one that's it's 2 that's constantly going through. The one is sense of community, which is understandable. I'm a first generation immigrant. That's always going to be a challenging one.
Yes.
And the second one's relationship, always. And it's I guess it's a bit of a defense mechanism in the sense of,
it's a defense mechanism.
If I don't get to know someone, no one gets to know me. There's almost I deal a lot of the imposter syndrome thing, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with.
Yes.
And putting up that emotional wall, if you're an imposter and you let someone in too close, they'll see you're an imposter. So what's the best way to not let anyone in close is not to get close to anybody.
Yes.
But maybe switching gears, because we've touched on different things that I can pick up in my life.
Sure.
But I really like that analogy you used of some problems in life are like a nail in the tire. modern therapy will try and teach you how to deal with the nail, pump it up a little bit, make sure you're regularly getting the air filled. While you say your alternative is removing the nail.
Yes.
So you've mentioned phobias and anxiety as two ones. What things are maybe nails in people's lives that they don't realize are nails in their lives?
You mean which am I understanding you correctly? Are you asking what problems do people have that they're not aware of?
Yes. Yeah. That can be solved with this, it doesn't have to be this way kind of solution to it.
Yes, everything. All their problems can be resolved for sure, 100%. And there's a lot of small little things that adds up, right? And that becomes a big problem eventually, because the person, again, it depends on if there's a gain in it, a secondary gain, like I explained earlier. Is there a gain in me having this problem and getting attention from other people? So let me add some more issues with this, right? Because then I'll probably get more attention. I actually had a lady that I saw. If you want to understand the secondary gain more, we can go into that. But that's basically, yeah, in a nutshell.
It's very interesting because the first thing I thought was that victim mentality, which is very prevalent these days.
Yes.
And probably the reason for that is it gives you the results that you're wanting. But
Yes.
how do you get people to recognize that they're a victim and not, or recognize that they're making themselves a victim instead of actually being a victim?
That is, again, making the unconscious become more conscious and making yourself aware of that. Because a lot of, again, a person that's got that secondary gain, they're going to try their damn hardest to try and keep it away from you, either trying to keep it away from you or make it difficult for you to work with. So it could happen that you help that person with a secondary gain. I've seen this before. I've actually had a client like that before. That lady that I just said was overweight. She's been to psychiatrists, she's been to psychologists, she's been to hypnotherapists as well. So she will feel better after the session. And then about a week or two later, it's like the juice runs out, right? And she starts feeling again. It's because of that secondary gain, right? And the only way you're going to find that secondary gain is through conversational. Just in the normal classical way is you're going to struggle to find that secondary gain. You're really going to struggle finding it because the person can hide it so well and they don't really want to get rid of it. It's just like you telling your girlfriend, go for therapy, go for hypnotherapy. You need to go for hypnotherapy because I had a lady that sent her son to me, a 16-year-old son that's smoking cigarettes, and she wants him to stop smoking cigarettes. And I asked her, does he want to stop smoking cigarettes? And she said no. So I told her, then you must come and see me so you can deal with your son and accept the fact that he's smoking and you don't like it. Because he doesn't want to stop. I can't work with someone that doesn't want to do it because now I can cause more inner conflict within that poor boy, right? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So on the secondary gain part of that, right? And you're saying people running out of juice. So I had two immediate questions with that. One, say we have someone that has a victim mentality and they're getting the secondary gain from people giving them the, oh, I'm so sorry, it's so bad. How do you help them find a different method towards that secondary gain?
Yes.
Maybe suggesting if you invite people to see you more often, you can get that same benefit without having to be down on yourself or something of that nature.
Yes. Yeah.
And the second question I had was for people that are running out the juice, are there practices that you can do independently by yourself to try and almost refill the juice box without having to go see somebody? So it's not this constant dependence on someone.
Yes. Okay. So on the just rephrase the first question again.
So the secondary gain that someone finds from perhaps being a victim, we can run that example. How do you help them find a different way of getting the same secondary gain?
Okay, so that will happen within that conversation, right? I will go and find out because I don't know. Again, I'm going to go with whatever the person tells me. So it will depend on what that person's framework is. What is it that they believe, and what's the reason for the secondary gain? That will be my main focus. What makes this secondary gain so important that you would rather screw up your health, your relationships, or whatever it is that's negative in your life due to that, and then we work on that instead of your weight loss and your whatever the other reasons or health, because that will automatically fix itself.
I see. So it's not necessarily find a different way to get to the secondary gain. It's to take that secondary gain off the pedestal.
Yes.
So you can see that this is just something that you've glamorized to a point.
Yes.
The attention of other people isn't actually necessary.
100%. Because again, there's some other resources you are not accessing within yourself that you do have available. You're not gaining access to that because you're stopping yourself. You closing the door. I want to find out, why are you closing the door to the resources that's here to help you for that secondary gain?
Yeah, it's almost like I'll reference some more work from Dr. K, because he's a very big proponent for meditation, as a practice. And the reason he says, the first thing you do in meditation is they say, notice your breathing. So if I say to you now, take note of your breathing, did your breathing change?
It will change, yes.
It will change.
100%.
They even say in the yogi kind of world, the monk meditation world, that the man that can notice his breathing without changing it is enlightened.
Yes,
And
100%.
enlightenment is supposed to be impossible for 99%
Yes,
of people.
you're right.
So the act of simply noticing things is 50% of the battle of getting yourself to stop those things. So how can people more often recognize these things? How do they tell them? How can they find these roots more often so that they can notice why they're doing things? What can they do?
You get a hypnotherapist. Because look, if the person could fix it themselves, they would have done so long ago.
Well, what about things like the equivalent of like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you teach the person how to independently deal with these issues so they're not dependent on treatment? Is there no kind of equivalent for this kind of problem?
Of course, you can, definitely. Especially once I've worked with the person, or let's say you come for a therapy session. Whilst I'm working with you, I will instill resources and ways for you to find those resources via the example we just used. In other words, I did the therapy with you. You just saw the result. You just saw, wow, I made these changes. I wonder what else you can do now. Knowing that you just quit smoking, that you struggled with for 20 years, what else can you do? And what else is going to be a bigger problem for you, a bigger challenge than that? Now, what I'm doing is I'm reframing it for you so that you understand you have these resources within you. I just showed you these resources. You just used these resources. So the next time, so the unconscious then gets primed. For the next time something comes up, that unconscious will pop up and say, I've done this before. I know this. I've stopped smoking. Now I must just deal with an argument I had with my girlfriend.
Or the weight problems, or
weight problem, whatever problem comes. I find a lot of the people once they've found help and helped themselves, because look, that's what it is. The relationship is, I'm just a conduit. I'm just helping you help yourself. I'm not going to give you advice. I'm not doing therapy in that way. You've got all of it. You've got all of it, right? And once the person realizes that, and they realize the resource is within, it's not in a therapist, it's nowhere else. And once they see it, and once they've dealt with it themselves firsthand, it becomes anecdotal. And once it's anecdotal, it's going to be easy for that unconscious to do it again.
It almost becomes like a how to do it yourself guide that you can then go copy and paste all those things into.
100%.
I got two questions on this now. So the first question is, it sounds like a lot of people that come to you are people struggling with addiction. Would you say that's like a primary group of people that benefit from hypnotherapy?
Sure, a lot of people are addicted to their problems. So most is addiction, right?
Yeah.
Because again, it's that secondary gain or other big reasons, like we said, due to early development. But yeah, look, I work a lot I've worked with addictions. It's not as easy, because you now have, it's not just the unconscious trying to sort out an issue, or there's physiological
I was about
reasons,
to say, you
right?
feel this dopamine track that's now primed. Everything.
There's I mean, you can be as happy as you want to. If I'm going to inject the right chemicals into you, you're going to get sad and down. And the opposite, you can be down. If I'm going to give you some MDMA or some, you're going to feel on top of the world, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, that's why if you're going to work with addicts, it's going to be a process. It's not going to, and I would rather work closely with a psychiatrist where they're already on meds, right? Depending on the meds, but rather work closely with a doctor or a psychiatrist where they are already on meds. Otherwise, it's going to be a struggle. Because it's not just a normal problem. Remember, they had a problem which was not resolved. They became addicts due to not resolving a problem. Now we got a second problem going on. Now there's a whole train, and there's this massive force behind all of that, right?
I think it's so interesting that you mentioned that thing of people that aren't very aware of how much endorphins have an impact on their lives, right? And I think of two cases that highlight this. The one is Andrew Huberman talked about the one story where he was giving a dopamine suppressant when he was in hospital the one time. And he immediately grabbed the nurse and it's like, what have you done to me? I want to die right now.
Sure.
And made him take him off the dopamine suppressant. And on the contrast of that, I remember I saw someone on MDMA, and this person did not look like they're having a good time. They took way too much of a dose, and they're sweating through their shirt, and like they're fidgeting, and they can't stand still. And I asked him like, "Hey man, are you okay?" And he goes, "I'm having the best time." So people really don't recognize the effects of endorphins and how much they have to control it. But something interesting I've noticed while you've been talking is giving people the agency to deal with their own problems as opposed to giving people advice on their own problems.
Yes.
And I think that's, I've had this theory for therapy for a while where I've thought that, modern therapy doesn't cater to men very well because it teaches men how to be okay in the situations. But in reality, I think what men want is for the agency to solve their own problems. For that, do you see a lot more men as your clients, and do you agree with the idea of giving them their own agency, or is it kind of applicable across?
It's applicable across, It's a 50-50. It's the same because, look, like I said earlier, for me, the problem is it makes no difference. It's a word for me, right? Obviously, like I said, addiction and some certain things, you're going to work longer with the person. That's just a matter of time. But the actual problem is the same thing. There's something inside of you that you think you do not have the resources to resolve. That's it. That's it. Whether you're female, the problem doesn't know if you're male or female, right? The problem also doesn't know whether the person is sitting across me is helping me or I'm helping myself. The difference is when you help yourself, you're empowered. Someone else helps you, it means I need to always come to you when I've got a problem, right? But if you get an example of what it's like to help yourself and to find your own resources, now you can learn this is a way for me to help myself. I've done this before with smoking or whatever it is. What makes me think I cannot do it with this problem? Because again, it's just a word, it's just a problem, right?
Do you think there are cross demographic difference? Do you find that like older people struggle more with this maybe because it's more ingrained into the subconscious, or do you think you have the same level of efficacy across?
Same. It's the same efficacy. It's just the older they are, the longer they've had their problem, the more professional they are at having problems. They just became a professional problem. That's all it is, right? They became good at having a problem. That's all it is.
But do you think it breaks down at the same rate, or do you have
same rate?
Interesting.
Same rate. The unconscious is exactly the same. Whether you're unconscious, someone else is unconscious. We're going to work with the unconscious. Your age is irrelevant. Obviously, an older person or a more mature person will have more resources to work with, right? Because you've had life experiences. That's what I call on. I call on a lot of life experiences that you've been through, right? Since you were a child, you had to learn to walk. You had to crawl. That's not an easy feat, right? You have to learn how to put one hand in front of the other, then a foot. Eventually you get up and you fall. Your ABCs. You had to learn how to write. You had to learn all those things.
I want to ask a question on that because you said you have more life experiences to call back on. Do you think it's also possible for people about the course of their lives to almost notice their own subconscious tendencies? You know, if we use the example of someone that's given up on relationships due to bad experiences, maybe like avoiding parents in their childhood or something.
Yes.
But then they have enough interactions that go positively that they can start to notice that their thought patterns are not correct.
Yes, unless it goes against whatever their unconscious is keeping there.
Mm.
So even if, in other words, even if they had the perfect life and good experiences to fall back on, if the unconscious intention is there to protect you, all of that's out of the window. And that's going to come out in, like I said, a behavior of depression or anxiety, regardless of what that person experienced their whole entire life, because their unconscious duty is to protect.
So you almost become blind to these signals that
You become
contradict it.
blind because if the unconscious wants to protect you, it's not going to make it aware to you, because otherwise it's not going to be able to protect you anymore.
I had one last question on this that I kind of wanted to go through, and it's a bit of a, I guess, an evolutionary question, right? Because I can understand the purpose of us developing analytical minds. It's how we evolved to be a dominant species on the planet. But what would be the evolutionary reason to develop a subconscious of things you're not even aware of? Is it just like this thing of these things are too taxing to think of, so you're kind of saving brain capacity?
It's your unconscious that's also beating your heart. It's your unconscious that helps you to move and digest food. That's all unconscious activities. All of that's unconscious. So that is your survival.
That's
right?
interesting. So that's almost suggesting that your brain views these defense mechanisms as important as breathing, eating, and so on.
Yes, definitely. That's your survival. The same as your unconscious keeping you breathing, and you need to up your heart rate or your breathing now because you need more oxygen because you're busy running. Otherwise, you're going to fall over because you don't have enough oxygen to the brain, right? You need the unconscious to communicate that. In that same way with the problem, it's exactly the same thing.
So it's almost like we developed this to offload survival strategies, like
Yes.
don't eat that mushroom, don't go into that part of the forest.
Yes.
And now that no longer is needed, so we're now taking modern day problems and trying to apply the same defense mechanisms, but they don't actually work, they don't serve us anymore.
Yes. Yes. It's there to protect.
This has been a super insightful conversation. I wanted to give you just the opportunity to let the people know where can they reach you, how can they get in touch with your services, what do you offer, give people a breakdown.
Cool. So, can I leave my details with you? Maybe
I will put them on the description as well.
Okay. I'm on Instagram as well. You can find me there, thealchemislab.official. That's probably my biggest engine at the moment I'm using is that. And then I go on word. People spreading the word for me, right? I've never marketed, I'm not into marketing it at all. I know we spoke about it last time, but I like to get people based on other people's phrases.
So
Right.
if someone watches this episode and they want to book an appointment with you, would they go to the Instagram?
They can go on Instagram or my WhatsApp now. I can give you my WhatsApp number and my email address. Then they can contact me through that, or they can go on the Alchemist Lab .site. It's a landing page there. They can get my email address there as well, and then WhatsApp as well on there if they want to communicate.
In terms of sessions, you work out Brackenfell. Can people electronic sessions as well, or is it all in person?
It's in person and online. Most of it's online.
Okay.
I do most of my online. Most of my clients is also overseas.
Interesting.
Yes.
Intriguing.
Yes.
So, but any kind of people you want to advise specifically, people dealing with addiction, young men, any kind of...
Look, I specialize more in, like I said, I'll work across the board, but my niche is definitely anxiety. Anxiety, subconscious repatterning, reframing. It's more the anxiety.
Okay.
Because I find it's a big problem. It's the number one problem at the moment. If you go and have a look, it's one of the biggest issues at the moment, and especially with men. Which it obviously women as well, but it's that stigma that goes along with it. Like you said, a man doesn't want to go and fix his problems. Because I'm not supposed to have problems. I'm a man, right? My wife can have problems, but I can go see a therapist. I don't go see therapist. I'm strong. I'm a man, right? And that causes the anxiety to just become way worse, right?
Build up and
Because
build up and build
they
up.
get anxious about the idea of being anxious.
Mhm.
So now they're stuck in a bigger loop, right? And there's no one to help me. So you know what? I'll just keep this. I'll just carry this on my shoulders forever.
Well, so after this, no one's carrying it on their shoulders. It's been fantastic having you. Do you have any final messages you want to leave with everybody? A goodbye message?
Do not keep your problems to yourself. You've got a very, very powerful unconscious. You've got a very powerful unconscious that's always been there and that's always will be there. And that's there for your protection. It's just, it's currently protecting you in the wrong way. We just need to find another way for it to protect you and safeguard you and stand on your side. That's it.
Absolutely brilliant. Love that. Don't keep your
Perfect.
problems to yourself. If you guys have enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please remember to leave a like, leave a follow, comment, share. Make sure to hit the one up at the Alchemist Labs to get some treatment if you're interested. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Cheers.